Hello. So, does objective morality exist? That is obviously a big question and one that I cannot pretend to answer exhaustively in a YouTube video. Um, but I do want to share some general thoughts on it because it's a big interest of mine. It was one of those philosophical issues that one of the first philosophical issues that I took a stand on, and I haven't my opinion hasn't shifted a great deal since. Um, Perhaps what is most interesting about it is I think many people out there in the general public almost have a platonic understanding of morality. Um, what I mean by that is in the same way that we could say like 2 plus 2 equals 4 is an eternal truth, we could say that like murder is wrong is an eternal truth, right? So 2 plus 2 equals 4 was true before humans existed. It'll be true after humans existed. Murder is wrong was true before humans existed, and will be true after humans are gone. I mean, people can explain this in different ways. They might say, these truths can be. You can appeal to a deity that makes these truths eternal. You might say a bit more esoterically, perhaps, that there's just something built into the universe that makes mathematics true, and that makes morality true. Um, or maybe in an almost natural laws sort of way, natural law theory, that when you get a certain level of, I don't know how you'd put it, cognitive development, or if you get a certain level of consciousness and subjectivity and awareness of self and awareness of experience, um, then these truths just sort of become true. Like they come into being, kind of an emergent property almost, um, because an organism um, with that level of consciousness um, was created, right? So, and I think there's probably there's good reasons to want an objective basis um, for morality. People have very strong opinions on moral questions, um, and there seem to be some issues that like some behaviors or actions that are just always wrong no matter what. Um, so it's always wrong. I think you would be very hard pressed to find people who say you know, there are instances when ethnic cleansing is wrong. Is ethnic cleansing is not wrong? Say our intuitions, I think, are no, that's just always wrong no matter what, or unprovoked attack on another country or another person is always wrong no matter what. Um, okay, so and I mean another attempt, I guess, to get at this subjective morality comes from someone like Sam Harris. He wrote The Moral Landscape, in which he argued that you know um, we can get morality from science, right? And I think he uses the example of um, when we put our hand on a like putting your hand on a hot stove is bad, right? And it's bad for I think Sam Harris would say something like, well, that's bad for everybody. um and it's bad for everyone. Well, it's one of those things, well, it's just sort of intuitive, well, we just know that's bad because many of us have have put our hands on hot stoves, and then we quickly realize that's bad. um that's not good for our health. um physical or mental. But ultimately, I mean, I don't think these attempts at a objective morality get off the ground. Um, and that's in part because I sort of take an evolutionary perspective to morality. Um, that is to say, if you look at the animal kingdom, if you look at social animals specifically, social animals do tend to have um, a code of conduct, right? There's certain roles for certain members of the group, and if you buck certain rules, there are social consequences. It's like the ant in the ant colony who is hoarding food can be literally kicked out of the ant colony, which is a death sentence. Um, and so, hoarding food in an ant colony, that's a no-no. I see that as sort of like the basis for morality, or kind of quasi morality, or proto morality. Um, and I think our like ethical systems and our moral propositions are just they are our social they are our pro-social instincts abstracted away. Um, they are our pro-social instincts turned into a more logical, put in a logical form. Um, and then we debate those abstractions and forms. Um, but if you think about it from that perspective, um, it lends itself to the idea that, well, I mean, there's no, as far as I can tell, there's no metaphysical reason why it is wrong for the ants to hoard food. Right? It's just that is a behavior the ant colony won't tolerate. Um, but I guess something else to say is, so not only does it not seem like uh, these like prohibitions among like social groups across the animal kingdom, doesn't seem like there's any inherent metaphysical reason why uh, these behaviors are wrong. Different behaviors might be more or less advantageous for different organisms. Um, and so, I mean, this lends itself to a kind of relativism. Like this species will have these social norms that fit them, and that species over there will have these other social norms that are beneficial for them, but wouldn't be beneficial for the first group, if you see what I mean. So, right, so that calls into question um, the idea that some behaviors are just inherently wrong always, or that and it calls into question the idea that there is some mind independent basis for morality, or that morality is and that the moral propositions can be eternally true, like mathematical propositions. Um, I mean, I don't call myself a moral relativist, and I don't call myself a moral relativist because I think there's multiple ways to understand moral relativism. I mean, I think one is the completely uncontroversial observation that anthropologists will make, which is just that morality differs from one culture to another. Right? That's more or less beyond reproach. If that's what we mean by moral relativism, okay, then really we're all moral relativists, because that's just like, it is just an objective fact that that moral norms differ from culture to culture. But I don't think because um, they are different cultures, um, that makes one moral norm better or worse. I mean, to put it another way, what I mean is, um, I think just because cultures differ in moral norms doesn't say anything about whether or not certain moral norms are correct or not. So just because the Taliban doesn't believe in women's education, for example, that does not mean that that's like morally correct for them. But in America, that's not correct. It could be the case that America's moral norm is like the correct one. Just to take an example, uh, despite despite there being different attitudes towards women's education around the world. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm not super comfortable with the moral relativist label for that reason. Um, I also think that, but I guess you could call me a kind of moral subjectivist. Um, I don't really have a. This is I'm still like working on this question in my head and like reading about it and thinking about it. I don't know exactly where I stand yet. Um, I tend to. I think I oscillate between, or have often oscillate between either expressivism, which it just says that um, moral claims are uh, 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 based on emotion. Like, if I say murder is wrong, that's just saying boo murder. That's one position that I think seems plausible. Another one is error theory, which just says like, no, moral claims are false because they do refer to something. There's just that thing to which they refer does not exist. Therefore, they're false. Like there is not this property wrongness out there um, to which you can refer, and so to say murder is wrong, well, that's just false. Um, Again, those both of those to me seem like plausible solutions. I am not sure which one I ultimately come down on. Um, I'm also a bit unsure what I think about the nature of moral language. Um, because on the one hand, I mean, to say they're partly emotion based seems, quite likely from a psychological perspective. Um, but you do get into some tricky logical problems. Um, so there's the issue of oh, where'd it go? Shoot. Well, I think it's the issue of like if you have an if then statement. So like if lying is wrong, then lying to your brother is wrong. It's a bit unclear how the expressivist would deal with that. And it also doesn't seem insane to me to say that moral statements are truth seeking propositions. It seems like we use moral language in that way. So when I say abortion is wrong, it seems like I am asserting a proposition to which there is a truth claim to be had. I don't know why I use that as an example. I'm pro-choice, but anyway. So yeah, I mean, this is one of the philosophical issues that I'm like trying to unpack. like it could be that moral language does um it could be that moral language is based on truth seeking propositions, but those truth seeking propositions are very um situation based, which I think I would slightly distinguish from relativist. Um, right? Maybe they're, when I say situation based, I mean maybe there aren't overarching moral truths, um, but there could be patterns of moral truths, and there could be um, it could be partly based on, you know, the individual's own conscience, um, and it could be based on um, very particular outcomes. So, I mean, I think I'm a to some extent I'm getting lost in the sauce here, but that's that expression's always kind of gross to me. But anyway, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, um, it could be true that like there are moral truths, but it is based on very fine details. Um, a kind of moral particularism. Like lying is wrong is not a universal truth, but there can be many situations in which lying just so happens to be wrong. Um, and like the moral particularist could use could say that say ethnic cleansing just so happens to always be wrong in each individual case, but that doesn't mean even that is an overarching moral truth. It just so happens that in every case it is wrong. If you see what I mean. So, I mean, I'm slightly blurring the line between normative ethics and meta ethics, um, which is to say, blurring the line between um, blurring the line between what is right and wrong, and the fundamental nature of ethics and ethical knowledge and moral language itself. Um, but I mean, they are connected, and so I don't know. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure what I think about moral about the nature of moral language. I don't think I want to go full positivist and say, that it's meaningless because it's not verifiable. Um, I just don't know. I haven't decided yet if they are propositions with a potential truth value or not, which is probably why I haven't quite decided between expressivism and error theory. Um, but I think ultimately, if one is sympathetic to, or one has a general starting point of empiricism, if one is generally wedded to the idea that knowledge does come from sense perceptions, on the whole, which is my that is the perspective I tend to hold. Then I think that makes moral claims very strange ones. And this is kind of in part the argument from queerness. These if these properties of rightness and wrongness exist, then they're the strangest properties we've ever seen, because they don't seem like anything else. Like there don't seem to be any other properties in like the empirical world that would be akin to these properties. Um, and I don't think you look at the world like I don't think our sense data, um, right, points to anything in the world that um, is wrongness or is rightness. Um, right. I mean, again, I just don't think there's anything. I don't think there's anything you can point to say that is what wrongness is in the world. Um, I think wrongness and rightness are a mental construct. Um, they come from people. They were in concepts invented by people. Um, and where that leaves us with morality, it's tricky. I mean, I think, I mean, I use moral language like everyone else, so it seems like moral language is something you can't quite escape. It's a useful tool. Um, and I don't. So I don't think. I don't think this moral anti-realism leads to you know being a bad person, or I don't think it leads to an anything goes mentality. Um, I think it just means we need potentially a new basis to justify moral language and a new basis to think about um, moral language and concepts. And I think it also should also lead to a high degree of tolerance. If there isn't this overarching objective morality, then I think that gives us some leeway in how we can live our lives and how we can relate to other people. Which again is not to say anything goes, but it is to say that we can be skeptical of a very rigid, prescriptive mindset. Um, it could be that there are many, many moral truths. Um, it could be that it could be that. I mean, it could be that it is. We are programmed with these pro-social instincts, and so it is pleasant or pragmatic to think and to speak in this way. Anyway, I've been rambling for a bit, and I didn't really provide a solid answer. But like I said, I think from an evolutionary perspective, and in an empiricist perspective, we should be quite skeptical of this idea that there is objective morality. I also think we should be skeptical of this idea that science can prove derive that. I think we should be skeptical of the idea that we can derive morality from science. Again, I don't think the scientific worldview in and of itself says anything about rightness or wrongness. Again, because it limits itself to empirical observation. It limits itself to constructing models of a phenomenon. The scientific method is a very. I mean, we kind of live in a world where some people are prone to scientism, so people can miss this fact. But the scientific method is a very modest, very humble procedure, which only gets you so far, and that's totally fine. And it does a wonderful job at what it's supposed to do. But again, you can't. I don't think you can run experiments that demonstrate moral truths. I don't think you can. I don't think. I mean, you can collect as much empirical data as you want, and I don't think that says anything about moral truths. I might say what people like and dislike, but again, people's likes and dislikes could be very removed from moral truths were they to exist. it's the old is ought problem. Just because something is doesn't mean it ought to be that way. Um, and someone like Sam Harris, who argues for this, kind of blends those two things in, I think, a very unhelpful way. Anyway, so yeah, that was kind of a ramble. But yeah, I was thinking about objective morality tonight, and I wanted to share some thoughts I had. Hopefully they were somewhat insightful, and I'm curious to hear what people's thoughts are in the comments. Thank you, and take care.